Hello, good morning. It's lovely to be here this Sunday morning, and I see some names that I recognize. I'd like to invite some of you to turn on your video so that I'm not looking at a completely black screen with boxes of names on it only. And also like to welcome everyone who is joining us on live stream on Facebook. And thank you, Michael. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah. Yes, here there are actual people there. Wonderful. Thank you, Jolene. Thank you. And before we start, I'd like to take this opportunity to express my gratitude for the Sangha members of the Chan Meditation Center, all the volunteers, and also, of course, all of you who attend and participate in these practice opportunities. It is because of your practice that this place of practice can be co-created and continue through this last few years, especially that we have to move our practice activities online. So I want to take this opportunity to express my gratitude to everyone. And so today's topic that I have set is cultivating loving kindness as a Chan practitioner. Many of you probably have heard about the practice of loving kindness meditation, metta meditation. And so you hear me use these terms interchangeably. Metta meditation is a practice to free ourselves from resentment and hatred by filling our hearts with loving kindness. Hatred and resentment poison our hearts, and harboring hatred causes suffering for ourselves if you have ever done it. It breeds hatred in our heart and blocks our natural capacity for wisdom and compassion. Our mind becomes so habituated to giving rise to hatred and resentment, it becomes our sort of like our default mode. And so when we encounter situations, we may become so habituated to giving rise to hatred and resentment that we direct this hatred toward our other people as well as toward ourselves. So hating ourselves is suffering and not in accordance with wisdom. And hating others is not in accordance with compassion. So you can see the importance of cultivating loving kindness in cultivating wisdom and compassion. When we cultivate loving kindness, we allow ourselves to release the tension in our mind held as resentment, giving ourselves an opportunity to reconnect with our natural capacity to empathize with other people's suffering and to wish upon them freedom from suffering. As we clearly see our interconnectedness, other people's happiness is clearly our happiness as well. Cultivating loving kindness toward others provides us with an opportunity to experience this truth directly so that it no longer is theoretical. Doing so as Chan practice also allows us to cultivate clear awareness of subtle habits of our mind operating in our relationship with others, so that we can see for ourselves how we generate suffering for ourselves and others, and thus resolve to stop perpetuating these unhelpful habits that cause suffering. So many of you who are familiar with metta meditation would be familiar with this, that it is understood as sending loving kindness in the form of wishing upon someone safety, health, happiness, and to be at peace. And oftentimes it's done towards several categories of people, starting with ourselves, a loved one, someone who's neutral, and then someone who is an enemy. Right? And in the Visuddhimagga, the path of purification, written by Buddhaghosa in the 5th century in Sri Lanka, Buddhaghosa explained why we should not start by developing loving kindness toward an enemy of others. Because I want to start here. Many people think that's like what we are trying to do, is to direct it at someone we hate. He points out that it is because it is fatiguing to put an enemy in a dear person's place, to put a dear person in a neutral person's place, or to put a neutral person in a respected or dear person's place. Right? In other words, the practice of loving kindness meditation is not about lying to ourselves about the current state of our relationship with an individual. It is not about trying to pretend to ourselves that an enemy is no different from someone dear to us, nor to pretend that a neutral person has the same place in our heart as someone we love or respect dearly, nor to downplay our close relationship with a dearly loved one to pretend that they are no different from a neutral person. Doing so is fatiguing. And so we need to see this and recognize this. And recognize that doing so is often unhelpful. Forcing ourselves to do that is unhelpful. And if you've ever tried it, you'll notice that it brings up resistance, because it goes against how we feel towards each person based on our affinity with them. Causes and conditions are such that we share a close and loving relationship with some people and a neutral relationship with many people we encounter in daily life, and a difficult and negative one with some individuals in our life. We would be deluding ourselves to believe otherwise. Denying the existence of these differences may also lead us to act inappropriately toward others, perhaps violating useful boundaries in relationships and causing harm and confusion as a result. Some practitioners may believe that is what we're supposed to do. Aren't we here to let go, quote unquote, of discrimination and attachment? One may ask. It is important to cultivate a clear and correct understanding of what it is that we're talking about. When we will practice to let go, we are letting go of our attachment to our idea of a person and to our idea of how our relationship with this person is always supposed to be, because we turned it into a fixed entity. The habit of attaching to these ideas keeps us from being fully present with the present moment experience of this person and relationship as it is, and causes suffering as we use these ideas to judge the reality of the person and the relationship, and inevitably finding it unsatisfactory as a result. And that is suffering. So when we practice loving kindness meditation, we need to start with using our meditation method to settle our mind. As the mind becomes more settled, we are able to see into the mind and recognize entrenched habits of reactivity that causes suffering. And as we become more clear about these unhelpful habits, we practice releasing these unhelpful habits. And in process, we are able to connect with moments of ease and contentment when we are free from our habits of suffering. Those moments we experience as feeling safe, feeling happy, and being at peace. And so these direct experiences of freedom and ease of body and mind It's very important in our cultivation of loving kindness. And so as we cultivate loving kindness toward ourselves, saying to ourselves, may I be safe, may I be healthy, may I be happy, may I be at peace. We start there, and we can recognize clearly the importance of freeing ourselves from suffering as a foundation for cultivating loving kindness towards other people. Because when we send loving kindness to a person, we see them as being safe, being healthy, being happy, and being at peace. The same way we experience this peace and happiness ourselves. That way, it is not something abstract. We're not just saying that may you be happy, may you be at peace, without ourselves actually having experienced it ourselves. We're not just making a wish. We are seeing clearly in our mind that this person is being truly happy, experiencing the same peace and happiness we ourselves have experienced. Hence, if we do not allow ourselves to be free from suffering, to connect with peace and happiness, we would just be saying some empty words when we send loving kindness to others. This is why Buddha Gosha emphasized the importance of directing loving kindness toward ourselves first. Some practitioners have encountered resistance to directing loving kindness towards themselves due to self-hatred and also habits of treating ourselves very harshly, with a lot of harshness. So recognizing this resistance is clear awareness we are cultivating as Chan practitioners. When we are aware of this harsh attitude towards ourselves, we can cultivate self-compassion, unconditional kindness toward ourselves, to release the habits of being harsh at ourselves by being fully present with our thoughts and feelings moment to moment. When we can hold ourselves with a tender heart, regardless of how we are doing and feeling, we develop the capacity to treat others with tenderness as well. Now, I have talked about the cultivation of self-compassion in another talk earlier this year at DDRC in great detail. So you can go to my website at RebeccaLee.org to listen to that. And today, I'd like to focus on the practice of directing love and kindness to others as a Chan practitioner. After we cultivate loving kindness towards ourselves, the next thing we can do is we can practice directing loving kindness to someone we revere and respect, oftentimes our teacher, as a way to practice extending loving kindness beyond ourselves. So we wish upon this good person freedom from suffering by seeing this person clearly in our mind, seeing and saying, may you be safe, may you be healthy, may you be happy, may you be at peace. And seeing our teacher's face clearly in our mind and seeing them being truly safe and healthy and happy and at peace, exactly the way we experience this peace and happiness ourselves. And we'll notice what happened is that we directly experience how we are the first to benefit in this practice as we fill our heart with loving kindness, feeling the happiness and peace we would like our teacher to experience. This helps us realize that our idea that we are giving our loving kindness to another person as if it's a thing we give to someone is actually misguided. The presence of another person in our mind, in this case, our teacher, toward whom we direct loving kindness, provides us with an opportunity to give rise to loving kindness in our heart, to cultivate and strengthen this quality of our mind. It is not that we have this thing, loving kindness, that is ours, that's mine, and we are going to have less of it after giving some to another person. Rather, we generate and experience more loving kindness as we direct it to others. Now, this is quite different from how we usually view giving. We are very much conditioned to believe that giving something is at our expense. After giving, you give it to another person and we have less of it. So we need to experience it for ourselves, how that is not the case, to realize that we have been indeed misguided. That is why we start with someone we revere and respect, to whom it is relatively easy for most to send loving kindness, to allow us to experience that this is so. As we engage in this practice, we need to maintain moment-to-moment clear awareness of the activities of our mind. Instead of assuming that we only have reverence and respect for our teacher, allow whatever arises in the mind to be there and to be fully felt and seen and heard. We may discover and experience deep gratitude, feeling blessed by the causes and conditions that allow us to be guided by our teacher. Connecting with this gratitude will help us remember not to take our teacher for granted. This attitude will help us to remain committed to the practice, especially when our self-centered attachment is challenged by the teachings. Very often in those moments, we may turn our anger and frustration toward the teacher, like we often like to do, to kill the messenger when we don't like the message, to protect ourselves, ideas of ourselves. So we direct our anger and frustration towards the teacher instead of looking inward to see how our entrenched habits cause us to suffer. As we maintain clear awareness while sending loving kindness to our teacher, we may notice traces of resentment or even anger toward our teacher that we may not be aware of. Now, this does not mean that you're a bad student or the teacher is a bad person. Watch our tendency to jump to that kind of conclusion. After all, human relationships are complicated. Teacher-student relationship is no exception, especially if we have been studying with the teacher for a long period of time and have developed a deep relationship. So allow these feelings of resentment or anger into awareness and allow them to be felt and seen and heard. And remember, teachers are humans too, and they have their habits and make mistakes from time to time. We can use this opportunity to reflect on our views by allowing subtle thoughts and feelings into awareness. And ask ourselves, are we expecting our teachers to be perfect? If so, are we angry at them for not meeting our expectations? Are we projecting our hopes and dreams for a perfect authority figure onto our teacher? Perhaps to fill the void of the lack of such a person in our life? For some, maybe due to their disappointment with their parents as their authority figure. Ask ourselves, if this resentment, disappointment, or anger is keeping us from fully engaging in the practice. As we take a closer look and being honest with ourselves, we may discover that is perhaps one of the reasons behind our resistance to practice. The practice of sending loving kindness to our teacher provides us with an opportunity to cultivate clear awareness of our relationship with our teacher. For instance, to unveil and recognize unacknowledged resentment toward them so that we can cultivate clarity around the issues and address them appropriately instead of allowing them to fester and damage our relationship. Oftentimes, we view our relationship with our teacher, whom we respect and revere, through a pair of rose-colored eyeglasses. We only see what we want to see. Perhaps a wonderful teacher we are following, and blocking aspects of our teacher's behaviors that do not fit into our idealized picture of our teacher. Recognizing that our teacher is not perfect may feel too threatening, especially when our identity is tied up with having a perfect teacher. This is why cultivating clarity of our thoughts and feelings toward our teacher is important. Hence, instead of feeling that something is wrong with us when we notice anger or resentment towards our teacher, it is actually good news that we notice these anger and resentment. This means that you are allowing yourself to see your teacher as they are, an ordinary human being, albeit someone who is experienced in the practice, but still an ordinary being. As Master Sheng Yen often referred to himself, he always said, I'm an ordinary being, not a Buddha. So there is more clarity of what you have been projecting onto the teacher that have been keeping you from hearing the instructions and teachings clearly and accurately. When we stop blocking our thoughts and feelings about our relationship with the teacher and the teachers themselves, we may realize that perhaps we have been hurt by something said or done by our teacher. And by trying to bury it in our mind, our feelings festered unattended. By allowing our experience into awareness, we can recognize what happened with less distortion. We can see clearly that perhaps, oh, yes, it was a mistake made, or there was a misunderstanding. Then we are able to see our teacher more clearly, their strengths and weaknesses, and we can see them as they are now and provide them with useful feedback to help them grow. As a teacher and as a human being, it is in fact a form of generosity because the teacher's growth will allow them to benefit more sentient beings. Because we need to remember, the teacher is co-created by our interactions with them as students. There is no independently, inherently existing entity that is, quote unquote, the teacher. So we're not talking about being critical and disrespectful. Our respect for our teacher helps us develop faith and confidence in the practice. We cherish the causes and conditions that allows us to study and practice with this teacher, remembering what a blessing it is to encounter a guide on the path. At the same time, we have to take responsibility in discerning our teacher's behaviors. When we notice resistance to sending loving kindness toward our teacher, allow what we have tried to block out into our awareness. And we may finally allow ourselves to acknowledge and recognize problematic and harmful behaviors of our teacher that we have been trying to rationalize or deny. Perhaps sometimes it can be something quite egregious, such as abuse or manipulation or some form of gaslighting. The clarity we cultivate in Chan practice allows us to discern what needs to and can be done and how to do so skillfully. We may decide to stay while being clearly aware of the teacher's tendencies, or we may decide to study with another teacher. It all depends on the specific causes and conditions. Directing loving kindness toward the teacher does not mean not holding them accountable and blindly obeying whatever they tell us to do. We have to take responsibility for our own practice. So I've been spending some time talking about loving kindness towards our teacher. For many of us, we're familiar with sending loving kindness to someone we love dearly. And in the Visuddhimagga, we talked about it as a way to break down the barrier we have established in our mind between self and others. And we start by practicing to direct loving kindness towards someone we love dearly. So we should choose someone who is alive, and we see this person in our mind clearly and see them being safe and healthy and happy and at peace the same way we experience this peace and happiness ourselves. As we do so, we feel the joy and loving kindness in our hearts. We reconnect with our love for this person, even though there might have been difficulties in our relationship. As for many people, we would choose someone with whom we have a long relationship to do this part of our practice. Someone such as our parents or a sibling or our best friend. And so inevitably, there would have been rough patches in these relationships. Actually, over the years, many people shared, like, indeed, that was the case. Difficulty in these relationships because of very different political views, perhaps hurtful things that were said or done in the past. So cultivating clear awareness allows us to realize how perhaps we have focused on our disagreements or a particular incident that hurt the relationship, blocking out moments of loving cares that these people have shown towards us, all the happy, joyful time we have shared together, and all the many different things that we actually have in common. So by opening our awareness to our whole relationship, we're able to see our relationship with less distortion, seeing it with all its nuances and complexity. Total clear awareness. And at the end of a retreat, after we practiced metta meditation, one retreatant shared with us that she discovered that, like, she she chose her mother that she loved very much as the person to whom she direct loving kindness, as the dearly loved person. And then she discovered that her relationship with her mother was not purely a positive relationship. So she was wondering, should I have put her as like a negative category instead? She discovered resentment towards her mother that she was not aware of. And this provides clarity of the resentment that has been operating out of her awareness, that has compelled her to blurt out harsh words toward her mother, whom she loved dearly. I shared this story with you because this is not uncommon. And if this is the case for you, there is no need to beat yourself up as a bad child for feeling resentment or anger towards your parent. As we maintain stability and clarity of mind in Chan practice, we can allow the thoughts and feelings that accompany the resentment and discover what are the knots that were formed in our hearts that block love from flowing freely. Perhaps you discovered it's a memory of being treated unfairly as a child. And when we were not able to voice our feeling and find resolution of the situation. This is also time to remember, to remind ourselves that as much as we may have looked up to our parents as little kids, they were not saints. They were people who get agitated and lose their temper and do not always treat everyone fairly, as it is not uncommon for parents to have favorites. They are also ordinary beings, like you and me. When we can see our parents as they are, we can recognize the incident that hurt and left an imprint on us was a moment when they've lost it or made a mistake. We have made plenty of mistakes ourselves and caused hurt feelings to others as well when our mind is agitated. When we recognize this, then we can empathize and forgive them, like we can forgive ourselves when we make mistakes. And also remember, this is something that's happened a long time ago. How about now? Are we stuck in a past relationship? I've met people who continue to relate to and interact with their parents the same way when they were a rebellious teenager who was dealing with a middle-aged, very stressed out, busy working parent. And that was like a very long time ago. Are we still replaying the pattern of interaction and feelings toward this person from that time? Do we see that we are really different people now? Like maybe ourselves, an adult, and our parents now much more elderly. They're different people. We are all different people now. When we allow the resentment to be fully felt and seen, these knots in our heart have an opportunity to dissolve, and our love to this person can deepen. As we realize that we are no longer in the relationship we had with this person in the past, we see clearly that relationships are constantly changing because they are the coming together of many, many causes and conditions. There might be people we were close to in the past, maybe our sibling or our best friend, and from whom we have grown apart over the years. We can practice recognizing that this is the current causes and conditions, that we do not have the same close relationship with this person, but it does not mean that we need to cut them out of our life or unfriend them or turn them into an adversary. Practice noticing this tendency of viewing our relationship in some kind of all or nothing terms. You are my best friend or nothing. This kind of mentality causes a lot of suffering. We cherish the affinity that we share with each other that got us to be connected. Of all the billions of people, this is someone that I met and had a relationship with. What a miracle. We cherish this affinity we share. And who knows, we may become close friends, or at least our relationship which become closer again when causes and conditions change. I had this student who shared this story I would like to share with you. She had this very long time friend who she was very close to, and they grew apart. In fact, they largely unfriended each other because of political differences. And in a recent incident, which is when her husband died suddenly, this friend reached out to her and became a main support during this very painful, difficult time. And so we can see how our causes and conditions in relationship with people can constantly change. We just never know. And so we can cultivate loving kindness by to break down barriers with others by directing loving kindness to those dear to us. And we can do so further by further breaking down barriers by practicing to direct loving kindness to a neutral person. Right? So someone who is not very close to us, is not an enemy either. And I have encountered a lot of practitioners who find it difficult to identify a neutral person, someone in their life who is not a dearly loved one and is not an enemy. So this is quite interesting, right? Because we surely have people in our life with whom we do not have a strong love or hate relationship. It may be the people at work we encounter occasionally, have only very brief interactions, or people who work at businesses we patronize regularly, such as a restaurant or a grocery store or a bank or post office. So, like, if this is the case for you, that you find yourself struggling to identify a neutral person to send loving kindness to, you might want to check to see if you live in your own head so much that you've been so self-absorbed going through life that you have been oblivious to the existence of other people most of the time. Right? The practice of cultivating loving kindness toward a neutral person then motivates us to be more aware of the people around us as we move through life. As we go through our daily life, practice being fully present with people we encounter. Now, we're not talking about trying to be friends with everyone. We are cultivating clear awareness of what people are doing that makes our life possible. We reckon we are able to notice how they are doing their part in the very complex processes at work. Also processing our mail or our meals or our grocery, all that's essential for making our life as it is possible. As we practice this way, it becomes easier to see that we truly are interconnected, and it is no longer an abstract concept. As we see the face of a neutral person in our mind in metta meditation, we see them being safe, healthy, happy, and at peace, the same way we experience this freedom from suffering. And over the years, many practitioners, after practicing metta meditation together, shared that they had trouble seeing this person feeling the same sense of happiness and peace as they would with a dearly loved person. This is an important realization, especially for those of us who believe that we do not discriminate. We've been telling ourselves that I love everyone, I don't discriminate. And we see for ourselves that we do indeed discriminate. So it is an opportunity to gain insight into subtle beliefs that have been operating out of our awareness, but shape our relationships and actions. So for instance, do we believe that these neutral people are less deserving of happiness, or that suffering is less important? Is there something about this particular neutral person that makes you resistant to directing loving kindness to them fully? Now, this may be quite challenging as we are admitting to prejudices that we have tried hard to hide from ourselves. It may challenge our idea of who we are. Perhaps we believe that we are someone who loves everyone equally, don't have prejudice, does not discriminate. So it's really important to notice the urge to make this pronouncement now. Okay, I'm a terrible person. And then followed by the urge to withhold love from ourselves when we discover these prejudices. When we notice these unhelpful habits, we are more likely to remember to cultivate unconditional loving kindness toward ourselves. Doing so will allow us to stay with our thoughts and feelings as they are, moment to moment, and allow all to be fully felt and seen and heard. We will see that without withholding loving kindness from this neutral person is actually withholding loving kindness from ourselves, because we are not letting ourselves to experience the joy and happiness of seeing this person truly feeling happy and at peace. As we realize how unhelpful habits of discrimination are causing suffering for ourselves and others, then we can commit to practice releasing these unhelpful habits. As we see that we do not need to identify with these beliefs of these people's inferiority or being less deserving, and instead of viewing them through our prejudices, we can begin to see them as fellow human beings who also wants to be happy and be free from suffering, like ourselves. Then we find it easier to see them feeling happy and at peace the same way we experience this peace and happiness. And the barrier we created in our mind to marginalize these people softens and fades. And we are freed from the barrier that makes us feel separated and isolated from others. That causes so much suffering. The last category of people we practice directing loving kindness to include people who are hostile, who are our enemies, the people we hate. So in this practice, we see this person clearly in our mind and see this person being safe and healthy and happy and at peace, the same way we experience this peace and happiness ourselves. This is, you can see, quite challenging. And I remember this story of a practitioner who talk about how when the metta meditation comes to this point, she feel that she hate this person so much that her blood pressure began to rise just thinking about this person. And then I have also encountered another practitioner who told me that I refuse I just refuse to have compassion for this person. So her hatred of this person was causing a lot of tension actually in her marriage because she was so angry all the time. So these people, they hate so much, were actually living their life oblivious to the hatred. Yet, practitioners, these practitioners are literally ruining their health and their marriage by harboring so much hatred and resentment. So ask yourself, is it in accordance with wisdom and compassion to harbor such hatred and resentment towards someone we hate? And I've also encountered a lot of practitioners after sending metta to this person they had a difficult relationship with, sharing that I thought I knew I didn't like this person, but I didn't know that I hate this person that much because I just can't bring myself to see them being happy. Quite interesting, right? So in fact, this is insight into our mind that we have not allowed ourselves to acknowledge our very strong feelings towards this person, this anger and hatred. And perhaps it's because it's not socially acceptable to feel such strong hatred. And so we convince ourselves that we don't really hate this person that much and dull our awareness to obscure these feelings. And as a result, we're not fully connected with ourselves. And it is suffering. Meanwhile, these unacknowledged hatred, they are still operating in our mind. They show up in our actions toward ourselves and toward others. And we feel that we're unable to stop it because we're not clearly aware of how it is triggered and unfolds thought after thought and then materializes into action. That's why by becoming aware of the hatred and extent of our hatred, we are taking an important step in releasing it. When we allow ourselves to experience the joy and happiness of seeing this person being happy, we are freeing ourselves from suffering caused by hatred and resentment. When we notice the thoughts such as we refuse to send loving kindness to our enemy, we may notice this thought in terms in phrases like, I refuse to free myself from suffering because this person has hurt me. We essentially saying this to ourselves. I'm going to refuse to free myself from suffering because this person has hurt me. Or we are essentially saying that I refuse to free myself from suffering until this person admits that they have done a terrible thing and changed their way. Until then, I refuse to free myself from suffering caused by hatred and resentment. Ask yourself, is it wisdom to insist on suffering until someone changes? You are letting that person control your life. Is it compassion to ourselves? Now, we are not pretending that they did not hurt us, that they did not do a terrible thing that caused a lot of harm. That's not what we are talking about. They're hurting us. It's like someone hold a knife and stab us, and cause a lot of pain. It happened. We're not trying to deny it. We're not trying to pretend that it didn't happen. Doing so will cause a lot of harm. So we acknowledge clearly that it did happen, and also acknowledge that we were very much hurt. Yet, when we harbor resentment and hatred and telling ourselves that I'm going to keep suffering until this person changes, or just because this person has hurt me, then what we are doing is that we are pulling this knife used to stab us and hold it and stab ourselves over and over again every time we give rise to hatred towards the person who hurt us. We may believe that we are hurting that person by hating them, by harboring this resentment, by withholding loving kindness from them. In reality, we're not hurting them at all. We are only hurting ourselves, stabbing ourselves with this knife over and over again, trapping ourselves in suffering caused by hatred. When we realize this, when we realize this, we see that we can realize how much this hatred has caused us a lot of suffering. And we may not be able to just drop the hatred because chances are it's a very entrenched habit. And thinking of that person, or we can still see these habits arising. But we can cultivate clear awareness to be with this hatred arising moment after moment, and become very familiar with how it's triggered and how it arises and compels us to perpetuate it. And practice remembering that we have a choice. We do not have to perpetuate it. Allowing ourselves to see this person happy and at peace is a way to help us stop perpetuating this hatred and resentment. That person may not even know we are sending them loving kindness, yet our heart is healed from the pain of hatred and resentment, and we are freed from the suffering it causes. So you can see that this is a lifelong practice. We need to be patient and kind with ourselves in the process. Remember, as Buddha Gosha said, it is not about putting a neutral person or an enemy in the place of a dearly loved one. It is about recognizing the barriers we have created to block loving kindness from flowing freely in our heart. When we block the flow, we suffer. So we practice working with ourselves where we are and be very gentle. So Buddha Gosha in Visuddhimagga talked about how we start with loving kindness to ourselves. Really take the time to do that so that we have this firm foundation. And then we can expand this by directing it to our teacher. And we want to break down the barriers further between self and others. We direct it to dearly loved friends, and to direct it then to a neutral person, and so that we can see that the neutral person kind of like a dearly loved friend, in the sense that bringing them into awareness more, seeing them as also deserving of happiness seeing their full humanity. Right? So it's a way of a form of widening our circle. This two sentences from a poem, Widening Circles by Rainier Maria Reiki, right? Where she said, I live my life in widening circles that reach out across the world. I may not complete this last one, but I give myself to it. That's our lifelong practice. And remembering how much happiness and joy we experience when sending loving kindness to our loved one, as we widen our circle of people to neutral people, we can send loving kindness to this way. We have even more opportunity to fill our heart with joy. This way, everyone we encounter in our daily life gives us an opportunity to practice cultivating loving kindness, and our heart broadens and feels less isolated and more connected with all beings. And when we're ready, we can direct loving kindness to a hostile person as neutral. So remember how we feel towards the neutral person, being able to see them happy, but perhaps not as strongly as the dearly loved one. By opening our heart to the hostile person this way, we're not forcing ourselves to turn the hostile person into a loved one, but we are freeing ourselves from resentment and hatred held towards this person. When we think of this person, it no longer gives rise to hatred and bitter resentment that poisons our heart. We are at least reducing the hatred perpetuated in our mind so that less hatred will be acted out toward ourselves and others. That in itself is compassion. We are doing everyone a favor by not causing unnecessary suffering for ourselves. When we are no longer blocked by hatred, we are more able to see this person's delusion and suffering that have caused them to hurt us in the past. Instead of hatred, sympathy naturally arises as we have experienced ourselves how our delusion and suffering have compelled us to cause harm to others and how it did not bring happiness. It is also easier for us to see that their happiness will lessen suffering for everyone. Directing loving kindness toward them becomes easier. We are free from the hold of these difficult relationships. We no longer need to fear encountering these people who used to trigger hatred and resentment. Then we can be truly free from enmity and suffering and at peace. So I hope this is useful for your own practice in cultivating loving kindness as a Chan practitioner. So, thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca, for excellent talk. And Rebecca Pusa, should we open up opportunity for everyone to asking questions? Thank you.
Sure, we are over time already, but like if you have a couple minutes, you want to stay, I'd be happy to.
And thank you. Pusa, if you have any questions, just raise your hands or you can type your questions into the chat box. Thank you. Since there's no question,
I think we're ready for lunch, right?
Yeah, thank you. Oh, Michael Pusa, could you please unmute yourself?
Master Sheng Yen said, he said a wisdom word. He said, if we have compassion, we have no enemy. So I also have ever just heard the Compassion Sutra, 持经. You also mentioned this kind of a practice. So this kind of a practice you mentioned today, you introduced today. The purpose of it is just to let us to make our our ego or ourself just less and less, so that can make the that just can make the barrier less and less. Is the purpose of it is that? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Yeah, like it is all the practice, all the teachings is to help us be free from suffering. Right? So when we harbor hatred and resentment towards someone we hate, then that is suffering. And of course, it's easy to say, hard to do. Oh, I just stop hating. If you ever have done that, try to stop harboring resentment towards someone, you know it's not that easy because of all the subtle thoughts and beliefs and ideas we hold in our mind about that person, about our relationship. And so that's why Chan practice of cultivating clear awareness of these subtle thoughts and feelings is so important in helping us actually release them through practice. Thank you.
Thank you for your teaching.